This episode is for e-commerce owners looking to find out how much profit they're making per order. My name's Luke Smith and this is Ad Spend Secrets. So in our agency, we work with clients not only on running their ads, but determining their scalability, profitability, unit economics, and margins. So we're looking at the bigger picture, right? If they're selling something for an average order value of $120, what does that look like in terms of items sold, cost of goods sold? What does it look like in terms of fixed expenses versus variable expenses over the course of a month, and what percentage of their expenses is fixed versus variable? How much do we need to spend on ads to help them clear those fixed expenses and start to get into that profit zone where they can really start to ramp things up? And in this episode, I'm going to share the exact document that we run through with our clients to help them discover all of these numbers. I'm going to share screen right now, and we're going to walk through a real-time example with some dummy numbers, obviously, because we can't reveal clients' actual numbers. But let's jump in here. If you're listening, I'm going to talk you through it. And if you're on YouTube watching, I'm going to walk you through it. So here we go. I'm just going to open up the document. Here is our unit economics and forecasting document. Again, we use this in our agency with all of our clients. If you'd like a copy of this, reach out to me at simplyconverting.com and I'll be happy to get you a copy that you can use in your own business to figure out these numbers for yourself. So what we're looking at here is expenses and margins in the first piece here. We're looking at variable cost per order. And the problem we're trying to solve is figuring out how much is left in the pocket after every order or every transaction that goes through Shopify, for example. So, you might be paying things like rent, or you might be paying for 3PL, you might be paying for agencies, you're paying for ad spend, and all of these things feed into the growth of the business in very different ways. And when you're investing in advertising, you want to figure out how much room to move you have. So it's all about, from our perspective as an agency, how far in the clear are we with clients' numbers, and how much extra could we put into ads so that we know that we can scale their new customer orders but still be in that profit zone. So we've got a space here for packaging, merchant fee that's pretty typical at about 30 cents. We've got transaction fees that again is fairly typical for a Shopify store of around 2.65%. Pick and pack fees, this varies between clients. This is an example here on the lower end at about $1.15. We've got some clients that are up close to around $4. So here we'll leave it at about $1.15. Product cost, so this is the cost of the actual product, the materials, etc., for just one item. And here we've got about $15. So where we're sitting at the moment with these numbers all considered is a cost of goods sold dollar value of $49 and a cost of goods sold percentage of 45%. So it's costing us roughly $49 to get the product ready to ship, essentially, all costs considered. Now, this might seem high, and you'll see why in a second. If we look at this calculation here for $49, we've actually got a multiplier. And what we're multiplying, and I'll just dip down to it and we'll come back up to the top, but we're actually multiplying this based on the basket size. So one of the common mistakes I see is people not factoring in the difference between the cost item and the cost per order, because the cost per order or transaction can incorporate 3 or 4 different items thrown into that same transaction. So the average basket size will throw out these numbers in very revealing ways. And we'll see the difference in just a second. But one example is we had a client that it was averaging 2.5 items per order. And then when they went heavily on discount, they're obviously giving away margin with the discount straight off the bat, but then the CPA, the cost per acquisition, drops because things become more efficient as the conversion rate increases. But one thing that is easily overlooked is when you're promoting and heavily discounting, how does the number of items per order change through that discount? Because typically what we see is the average order value can actually increase even though you're discounting, and it's typically because people are throwing more items in the cart. And so one of the costs that then heavily influences profitability in a situation like this is, you no longer have one item per cart at say $15 per item. You might have 3 or 4 items per cart at the same cost, obviously to produce that item in terms of materials. So you might have 3 items which totals $45 of product costs. And that can really squeeze your profitability, and it's something that can be very, very easily missed. And so this calculator takes into consideration the average number of items in the basket so that we can try and factor in all different scenarios, and we can map out what it might look like in terms of a promotion if we're looking at a client's historical performance, and we can see how the average items per order might change when they've done heavy discounting versus more always-on style ads and creative. So here we've got a $49 cost of goods sold. It gives us the difference, which is the gross profit margin in terms of a percentage and dollar value here. Number 2, we're looking at shipping. So depending on your thresholds, you may cover shipping for customers if they order over a certain amount. So typically it might be free shipping over $100 or free shipping over $150. But if your average order value is sitting differently than that, then you might be actually out of pocket for quite a few orders. If you've got free shipping over $50 and all of your orders are coming through it, so say AOV of $100, you're typically footing the bill for a lot of that shipping. And so what we've got here is $8 just as a bit of an average. That might be different for you, but good to work out what that might be. And we've got a section for discounting here. However, we've got that marked to 0 in this example. If we're taking the AOV from Shopify, that often it already encompasses and incorporates discounting. So we've just left the discounting section here blank. We've got a section for operating expenses. So anything outside of those per order costs is what you'd pop in here. So imagine a scenario where you've got subscriptions of around $350 a month. You've got rent or product storage of $300. You might have a motor vehicle that's sort of propping up those expenses, but let's keep them low for now. We can see how that pans out. We've got an ad spend of around $5,000. And here's where we've got the items sold per month and orders per month. And the average basket size is pulling from the difference between those two. So in Shopify, you'll be able to see your items sold per month and your orders per month and your return customer percentage. So that's where that would stem from. And then what we've got is our average gross revenue, which is the orders per month multiplied by the AOV in this example. And then we've got variable costs where it starts to tally up those variable per item costs. So we've got discounts, the COGS that we saw up above, and shipping. And then when you subtract the variable costs from the gross revenue there, you've got what's left over. So your gross profit is around $14,000 in this example. And then your net profit would be, okay, well, we've spent on ads and we've got a number of fixed expenses. So let's subtract those and see how we fare afterwards. And then what's happening is we're breaking that out between new and returning customers. So we've got a rate of 15% for returning customers, which breaks that down to about $1,300 in this example of net profit coming from returning customers and $7,800 coming from new customers. Then what we're doing is looking at the net profit per order and the net profit per item. And this is where it's really interesting. So this information is key to see how much room to move you've got with advertising, how much further you could potentially push things with ad spend. And we're looking at our performance metrics here. These are very ad specific. So we've got our marketing efficiency ratio. This is indicating that 16% of the store's total revenue is being spent on ads. The blended ROAS is essentially the inverse of that. So for every dollar going into ads, we're getting $6.20 back. And we've got our blended CPA, so our cost per order, again, number of orders and amount spent on ads to calculate that one there. And then we've got our customer acquisition cost. So this is really just looking at the new customers and looking at what it costs to acquire a new customer. LTV over CAC. What this one is doing is it's looking at the lifetime value of a customer. We're doing a 30-day LTV here because a lot of e-commerce stores, and I've spoken about this in a few different episodes, is most e-commerce stores aren't going to want to wait 365 days to, realize the true lifetime value of a customer because they want to reinvest that into either stock or advertising. And so we're just looking at how much that is bumped up in a shorter time frame. So here we've used 30 days. You could use 60, 90. Again, that's going to vary depending on the store. And then you divide that by the customer acquisition cost, and it's going to give you a bit of a number. So we are getting 5 times or more in terms of the value of a customer compared to the cost to acquire a customer. So it's a very good place. Typically, if we're 5 or above, it indicates we could probably spend more on ads. This is giving us our break-evens as we scroll down. So break-even metrics, we're looking at a CPA cap of $50. So given all of the numbers that we've just looked at, it's indicating that we could spend up to $50 per order. If we start to spend more than that, we're going to start dipping into the red. And then blended ROAS, the break-even there is essentially the inverse there. We able to get a 2.2 to 1 return on ad spend. If we start getting less than that, we're going to be in the red in this scenario. So let's have a look at what changes. So we've got an average basket size here of 3, and we've got an average item price of $36. The average item price is simply the number of items in the basket and the AOV, I believe. So what we're doing is we're looking at, so we're looking at the AOV divided by the number of items in the order, and it's just giving us an average item price. Again, that's just an average. It's going to vary. Some might be higher, some might be lower. But here we've got 3 items per basket. So what happens in a scenario where we have significantly less items per basket? So right now we're looking at a net profit per order of $27. So if we all of a sudden, instead of having over 3 or around 3 items per order, imagine a world where we have less than an average of 2. So we can change that to 350 items total and the same number of orders. So we've got 282 orders and we've got just 350 items instead of the previous 972. So what happens to the profit? Well, you can see here the net profit per order has jumped right up to $53. And the difference there is the number of items in the order and the reduction in the product costs at the top. So when we're looking at the variable cost per order, instead of saying 3 times $15 because there's 3 items in the cart, we're saying 1 times $15, obviously. So the product costs are much lower. So I hope this was helpful in just visualizing the difference on the bottom line, on the net profit per order, when you're running a sale and you might have more items added to cart. I feel like it's something that's often overlooked, not just by brands, but by agencies as well. And so by looking at things in this light, it helps you plan how much you should or could be discounting and really mapping out how much net profit's going to be left over before you even launch a discount or a warehouse sale or anything like that. So I hope that was helpful. If you've got any questions, again, just reach out at simplyconverting.com and you'll be able to find more details there.